You could tell us your name and where you're from.
It's Alan Mankewich, and I'm a resident of downtown Winnipeg.
Well,
thank you. Before I begin, I'd just like to thank all of you for your public service in your various capacities. And I'm here today to talk about a few things related to policing and carceral issues from a disability justice perspective and share a few other general points. I know that being critical of police budgets and incarceration is an unpopular thing to do, and it's something our elected officials likely feel uncomfortable talking about, but I think it's a very important issue to be discussing. From a disability justice perspective, I'll share some information from a BC coroner's report which analyzed 127 deaths from 2013 to 2017 involving police interactions, and including death related to police use of force and suicides that occurred within 24 hours of police contact. It found that more than half of those who died were exhibiting mental health symptoms at the time, and 69% had a history of mental illness. So instead of more policing, I would argue that we need more community mental health resources. In terms of folks with conditions like FASD, we know from a 2013 meta-analysis conducted by the Edmonton-based Institute of Health Economics, they concluded that FASD prevalence in correctional systems ranged from 9.8 to 23.3%. It's often a condition that's really hard to diagnose, so that's why I believe there's a big range there. If we provide more supports for folks with FASD, like supported housing and adequate resources to staff those homes, I believe we can reduce the chances of these folks finding themselves in situations where they're having negative interactions with police or facing incarceration. Canada has approximately 25,000 people incarcerated in provincial and territorial jails and another approximately 15,000 in federal penitentiaries, not to mention another approximately 100,000 under supervision of like parole. Of those sentenced to federal penitentiary, 1 in 4 has a diagnosed mental health illness and 80% have serious substance abuse problems. So instead of devoting more resources to police, I would argue that we would be better served supporting folks who use drugs and people who are experiencing mental health issues. As others have mentioned, when we get to the point where police response is necessary to various situations, it's a massive indictment of various system failures. Policing is a very incredibly inefficient way to deal with social issues. The budget presentation makes references to public perceptions of policing and safety. I think for many people who live in certain areas of Winnipeg, when they visit places like downtown where I live, I feel like they perceive it to be an unsafe place. But I feel like many people conflate being uncomfortable with being unsafe. If you don't live downtown but occasionally visit to go to a sports or entertainment event, you might see things you're not used to seeing in your own neighborhood. But does that mean there's a safety issue? Turning downtown into a highly securitized and policed environment is not the solution, in my opinion. So what can we do? We definitely need more community resources, as I and many of the other presenters have mentioned. Raising taxes is one option. Again, like I said at the beginning, we're talking about things that are potentially unpopular. But I'll give you an example. If my property taxes go up by 5%, that'll add less than $7 a month to my property tax bill. That's about the cost of one beer in a restaurant. Personally, I could do without that beer, and I would rather see my taxes go up a bit so that other folks in Winnipeg can live in a dignified way. We can also raise the business tax, which has been cut to the bone. Businesses benefit from operating in stable societies. Such societies are created by ensuring we are working towards eliminating things like homelessness and poverty. Running a business is tough, but small increases to taxes could raise the necessary revenues to fund things like functional transit systems, which connect people to employment, which can create stability in someone's life, and make it less likely that they might have some interactions with the police. More revenue could also fund programs to help unhoused people get into stable housing. We can also help people who are struggling with mental health and addictions. We definitely need more 24/7 safe spaces for our youth, in my opinion. All of this can be done by raising a little bit of extra money through the measures I mentioned. Some of these solutions will likely take collaboration between all levels of government, but in the meantime, the city can fund more of these solutions if the political will is there. Our public officials were elected to make Winnipeg the best place it can be for everyone who lives here. Sometimes that involves making unpopular decisions, like devoting more funding to community initiative rather than policing, or raising taxes, which is always politically unpopular, as I'm sure you're all aware. With that, I would just like to wish you all the best as you continue your deliberations on the police budget, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Board members? Nothing at all? How long have you lived downtown, sir?
A grand total of about 10 years over 2 different phases of my life.
And because I'm just kind of wondering from the whole discussion that you're having about comfortable in the neighborhood and stuff.
Yeah.
Do you have the change hasn't been obvious to you, or like for the crime that you hear so much about
right.
it? So I'm just you've been there a long time. I'm simply asking because I'd like to hear your opinion.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And this is simply my observation. It's not backed up by stats or anything, but. No. The things I'm noticing are things like, property crimes, my neighbors getting their cars broken into, that kind of thing. And, that's something you'll deal with in any neighborhood.
Yeah, good. That's interesting. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it very much. Our next delegation.
Our final delegation is John Drabble.